In the next hour, we want to talk about whether the internet community is dead or not. Do we want to give the answer away? No, we'll tell you later. So this is about what's the current situation in internet policing. Are there any successes? Should we give up and play computer games instead? Well, we don't think so. If you look at internet policy in the last 15 years, you realize, well, copyright law still not changed. We're still click for click, we've been criminalized. It's hardly possible to live online without breaking copyright law, or in short, everything fun is outlawed. On the other hand, there's lots of practices that are legitimate and legal in the US, for example, but not here. So that's the one thing. A recurring discussion. And on a European level, we're talking about reforming copyright law again, a little too late, but not too late to contribute. On the other hand, we have Edward Snowden. 2 years ago, Edward Snowden has revealed that we have made it too easy on criminally acting secret services. We weren't vigilant enough. For 2 years, we were discussing, and nothing has happened. The only response of the German government was more surveillance. For 2 years, we had a debate that's more positive. Because for the first time, at least on a national level, we're talking about whether maybe there's more behind the strategy of the government to just ignore everything and let it pass, may not be sustainable as they thought. Last year, we had die Bekazin. And we had the digital civil society. That was maybe a handful of people. It's gotten a little better, but it's still not enough. We had the Pirate Party, a huge hype, Democracy 2.0, and so on, liquid feedback, bring the revolution. Since 2 years, basically nothing has changed in the system. The last update is from June or April 2013. But internet policy is not at an end yet. We sent our best man to Brussels to, well, we don't know, to announce Society 4.0. Now we have a problem. Do we let him act or not? We're in favor of not giving up. And generally speaking, Society 4.0 sounds better than Society 2.0. And if that gets our parents involved, hey, okay. On the other hand, we have a situation that internet policy is not a niche anymore. Proof, SPD, the German Labour Party, is now discussing Netzpolitik on all levels. We don't know yet what to think about it. We don't know what will come out of it. But it's good that suddenly we have a societal debate that we have asked for years. And suddenly, internet policy issues have arrived in the middle of society. Also, Church Congress has invited Angela Merkel to talk about internet policies. We have a competition. Germany looks for the next internet minister. We have the absurd situation that we have 3 ministers that split up the digital agenda in between them. And there's no logical reason for this except that we have 3 parties, and each of the parties in the coalition wanted to have someone who could also be internet minister. And that's nice because before, nobody wanted to get involved with this topic. Now it's actually a career change. Disadvantage, of course, they don't work together, they're jealous, and nothing interesting is happening. We also have a 4th internet minister, Ms. Vanka, who's actually the internet minister. Because when you look And where the money is coming from, it comes all from the research centers. But unfortunately, she has the Messier in front of her, so that's not working out. When we prepared, there was a good curve that describes where we are now. So in a way, it all becomes obvious when you look at the hype cycle. It's a hype cycle of trends, technologies, you might notice. So first, something new appears. Then you have the peak of inflated expectations. You go to the throw of disillusionment. So currently, the internet society is 80% of the population. In other words, you could say that's the internet community, that's our society. And we can't rely on those who were active in the last few years as senders on the internet and trying to mobilize people, that they still do that. And so now the task at hand is to mobilize everybody else and try to get them to become active, to get out of the throw of disillusionment and reach a slope of enlightenment that we hope to reach in the next few years, to finally realize that internet policy is a field of politics that has developed and will stay. And there's a lot of topics where we were defeated at first, but there are also some successes. And what we're trying to do today here is to argue that maybe we have already passed the throw of disillusionment, and it might already be going upwards again, when even the Labour Party is discussing digital life on their lowest organizational forms. So we tried to prepare a talk in the form of a listicle by way of 10 policy topics. Try to find the good in it. Of course, we don't want to say only that everything will be fine. We're not convinced of that. But we are convinced that in some areas, things have happened that give us hope that things are actually changing. So when you say one of the big mistakes maybe of also of the Pirate Party was that if we come and because we're digital, we can solve policy problems at the speed of Twitter shitstorms. That obviously didn't work out. So we tried to look for the good and successes in 10 topics, but there's also a certain suspense curve in the listicles. So we begin with the topics where it was easy for us to see the good. And as the talk progresses, we will reach the points where we had to be more creative to find the positive aspects. Spoiler, the more Günther Oettinger gets involved, the harder it was for us to find the silver lining. So there's one field, it's like the classic of internet policy, that existed before there was even such a thing as internet policy, and that's open source software. And there too, we already had the peak of the hype cycle. It was more than 12 years ago in Germany. In 2003, a German city made it to the front page of USA Today, and everybody thought this would be the age of Linux on a desktop, and only a few years later, everybody, all municipalities would be using Linux on a desktop. And of course, we could also tell this as a story of failure. Now it's 13 years later, and Munich is still the only city using Linux productively. So this hype is not come true. But the problem is that you would still look at the systems that don't dominate anymore. Because what counts today is mobile, and the mobile market looks completely different. In the mobile market, we have a incredibly dominant system on the basis of open source. And of course, many people will say, yeah, but that's Google, okay? and you have to install lots of Google apps. And when you look at all the apps that run on Android, okay, so it's not really open source because most of the apps aren't. And when you look at other competitors in the Android market, you can either go to Amazon or to Microsoft. So you can say, yeah, okay, it's open source, I guess, but maybe it's not as good as we thought. On the other hand, we would probably argue that's what mainstream looks like. Just because it's open source, it doesn't mean that large corporations will not come in and try to do the business with open source. It's still capitalism, baby. Only because we have open source, it doesn't mean that large corporations will not come in and play a large role in the ecosystem. On the other hand, there's also, for almost all of these applications that I will just show you, there's open source alternatives. And the fascinating thing is, you can say that this development that is supposedly community-driven and also corporation-driven is slowly arriving in a political on the political agendas. The European Commission has published their open source software strategy recently, and they have caught up to what actually happens. At least that's what the Free Software Foundation Europe says, when they say that with the new strategy, the Commission catches up to the status quo at free software. And I would say that's good news, because in copyright law, for example, we would be happy if the European Commission would actually catch up to the status quo in discussion. So the next topic is open government or freedom of information. We have a Freedom of Information Act in Germany, and luckily we don't have to discuss anymore about whether open data makes sense or not. But we still have to discuss about which open data do we want. And we have to actually ask for it, challenge it, because the things we've seen presented based on open data so far, that was nice to have. I believe the most popular piece of open data in Berlin last year was a list of Christmas markets. And that's nice, but I venture that there might be more interesting data sets that we can request. Open government does mean more, though. Open government means that we turn the principle of freedom of information around. Up to now, for the last 10 years, we've had the Freedom of Information Act. We're slowly trying to test that out. We see there's lots of weak points, and especially it's still a bit law. But if we turn it around and make transparency the default, actually we only want to discuss about the exclusions that will not be put online, and everything else should be put online by default, because internet has lots of room left. That's when we reach something, and I believe we are on a good way there. Might need a change of government to become a little more progressive, but at least we have good tools to make use of the data and make it more presentable. Our favorite tool at netzpolitik.org is Frag den Staat, nominated for the Crime Online Award. You can all vote for it and give a round of applause. Stefan Wehrmeier and colleagues have created a superb platform, because we all have the right to put in a Freedom of Information Act request, but I don't know how it works. I've never done it, even though I actually do them every 2 days, but I always use Frag den Staat. So it's kind of a game in netzpolitik.org. We read in some magazine about some document, and we say, well, why don't we try to get that? And then we put in a request. And every few weeks, it seems like they look at all the requests at once. And then we get a huge amount of mail at once that says either, yeah, no, you can't have this, or here's the requested information. So it's getting better, but it's still not enough. So we have a problem, and what we have to do is we have to go to the courts, we have to sue the state, which does cost lots of time and money, of course. But if we have good requests and bad rejections, then we're usually capable to motivate lawyers to work with us. The disadvantage is that it takes a long time. There's one thing I've been going on for 1.5 years. I just had the first preliminary hearing about the ACTA papers, and the court date has been set to July. Failing that, we might have to go to go to different courts, and it will take even longer. But it's important to do that because that's the only way to actually get what is rightfully ours.
And there's a third area that starts with open. We are open source, open government, open data. There's open education. It's a little easier to see. There are a lot of net politics interested people and active people who have actual progress and who want to create an open database. In Germany, there's a big movement, and it doesn't take as long as an open data. In the last 2 years, there was a lot of dynamics in this area. Open education, what is it actually? If you have to make stuff available on the internet. There's digital school books that was more like flipping through books on the internet in Flash. It's a bit like print online, but it's not really possible to use it without the internet, even if you have it installed. There's like digital learning stuff in Germany, and it's really interesting if you look at it in the school area, who's actually paying for this. The most German countries who are paying for this, they have a freedom of material, and there's a short summary. Learning materials is public, and it's usually financed by the parents. But why isn't it possible to put it online? Why can't they combine it? Two and a half years ago, maybe someone reminds that there was a school Trojan horse. The main school book houses wanted to search for special copyright, and they wanted to have more open licenses. And the result of this is a report on a group combined by people from the government. This is the front page. The conclusion of this paper is the positive possibilities of open education is mentioned, but they also need support for this development. Well, yeah, words are cheap. Everything is on paper, but whatever. This year there was 2 million in the state, and all of other state money was made possible for open education and open data. But it's not really so remarkable if you compare it to the USA, who actually invested 2 billion in open education. So this is not really a lot, but it's a start. And you can actually say that's something good. It's a good start, and it's really possible to see the good in this. So I have to explain the mass storage of data. Data retention policy, it is. And we have to get through this now. You have the data retention. Well, we used to have it. Two courts said it's not possible to combine this with the law. And we think our parents wouldn't allow that to happen, to save data for weeks, for months. Who talked to whom in the analog life, where they were, whom they've met for coffee. But the problem is many people don't really see that, what's happening with all the data online. The politicians of the big coalition in Germany, they are telling themselves fairy tales why we need the data retention. And there's no study that actually proves that data retention that we used to have, it's actually useful for hunting criminals. Richard Gutjahr from Germany told us gave us this kitten would have to die without the data retention. But we have a justice minister who started off as civil rights advocate. There was Sigmar Gabriel who had to change in 180 degrees. And well, yeah, data retention is really good, and that he has to stand for this. And the hope we have is that sometimes we have two courts, maybe only one, the Bundesverfassungsgericht in Germany, that have to decide. Even in the new trial to set up the data retention, they come to the conclusion that a complete protocol of our communication habits is not conflicts with the law, and it actually looks like we don't need more means, but fewer means to have an open life and to lead an open life. Well, we still have the hope that there's something that can change, and there was a workshop from German Social Party to coordinate people. There's around 50 groups. They have different groups to say something about data retention. And we're really interested if that's actually working and how Sigmar Gabriel will behave. And it's also not really easy to talk about broadband. You could say that this topic should be at first. But there's one thing all parties are sure of, that we need serious broadband internet for the industry 1.0, 2. Whatever. And we also need to connect the smallest places with broadband internet. It's also in the coalition paper from CDU, CSU, and SPD. They want to have a serious connection with at least 50 megabits. They actually held that. And they also renewed this in the digital agenda, where they want
where they promised a broadband infrastructure using modern technologies, but again, they put the number at 50 megabits. Between the lines is that it's enough if there's a LTE tower somewhere that gets 50 megabits to the entire community and the environment and the surrounding cities, because then in theory you get 50 megabits, except of course that only works and there's one person using it. So everybody talks about broadband, but almost nobody has it, especially not in Germany. The good news is there's about 170 countries that have even worse broadband than Germany. We're trying not to be cynical here, but what we want to say is there's other ways to get to online or to get a broader access to faster internet. One of them would be the supporting free and open access Wi-Fi's. There is an initiative on a European level called Europe Loves Wi-Fi, and there is a press release from the European Commission saying Europe loves Wi-Fi. So yeah, Europe maybe, but in Germany the people do. But there's also from the coalition agreement that they want to try to have free Wi-Fi available, mobile internet and Wi-Fi available for everyone, but they prioritize the legal issues. So in the digital agenda, they started focusing on IT security, and that there should not be any more open doors for cyber criminals. So you can imagine that Berlin may not become like New York or Paris as far as Wi-Fi hotspots are concerned. In the meantime, there's even been a suggested law about reducing
Liability.
the liabilities in free Wi-Fi's. And we've talked to someone who is who's very very well informed about the topic, and he says that it's completely ridiculous and a disgrace. So the most likely way of solving the problem will be a solution on a federal level. On the other hand, it can hardly be any worse, so we're still hoping for improvements in the parliamentary debate. There is a will to actually, there's still a possibility to reduce the liabilities and actually enable Germany to have free and open Wi-Fi. So please write to your local representatives. The next topic is network neutrality. That's also a little hard to see the good in that debate. But of course, it's better to have it. We've been talking about it for 8 to 9 years on Netzpolitik. Until a few years ago, this bird became well known on the internet. The Drossel, German for throttle, and the bird. And that's when German telecommunications agencies started making plans to limit and restrict their services unless people and suppliers pay. The German chancellor then declared that there may not be a internet of two classes. On the European level, everybody is saying we want network neutrality, and everybody was agreeing, and then they followed it with a but. So currently we've reached a position that our government says we don't actually want network neutrality. Of course, they always say we want network neutrality, but the poor telecom industry, they want to build a fast lane, but they can't, except for the Christian Socialist Party. No one else sees it that way. So in the US, we had a debate where the FCC has voted for clear regulations regarding network neutrality. On a European level, we have a discussion where on the one hand, we have the parliament that demands clear rules for network neutrality, and on the other hand, the European Council, led by Germany, with the diametrically opposite position. And yeah, while Angela Merkel is still explaining that we don't need network neutrality until everything is everybody has fiber to the home, and experts say network neutrality is they say the exact opposite, because you only need to talk about this because you don't have the necessary infrastructure, so we have to treat different streams differently. And then we have Günther Oettinger. We could have showed him in almost each of these topics. We're big fans of his speeches and interviews and everything. And we're always happy that we have Günther Oettinger in this post. Just imagine we have a Bulgarian European Union commissioner with a name that you can pronounce standing in for the same positions. So the good thing about this debate is that thanks to his versatile statements, we managed to get a public debate going about what he's actually saying. So when we had a debate, he basically repeated what the boss of Telecom told him a few minutes ago. He also said it's about driving cars because network neutrality cannot ensure that our self-driving cars can don't hit each other, because if the internet suddenly disappears, then I don't know, because the passenger on the back seat downloads a video from YouTube and that causes their car to crash, well, then you have a problem. So when you ask the manufacturers if they actually need internet connection, those who give public statements all say, no. So can you imagine Google allowing the FCC or even fighting for network neutrality if they saw a danger for the self-driving cars? No. In Germany, there's BMW. They have self-driving cars, so they were asked, do you need internet? And the technicians say, no, why would we? So that's clearly a lie. So just by exposing all these lies and fairy tales, we get a public debate going about the internet as a public good, and maybe even reach a European compromise that strengthens net neutrality instead of weakening it. Another good thing that this year there will be another safety internet action like last year that managed to mobilize many citizens to use even archaic technologies like faxes to contact their representatives. Faxes are approximately the only means of communication, except actually going there and knocking at the door, that doesn't have a spam filter. And so far, just send your representatives faxes. Convince them net neutrality is important, that that's something we need to fight for. Be courteous, but yeah, we can win this. It's getting steadily harder to see the good, but we have to say this is a hellish topic. Copyright law there has been some movement in the last few years. It was high time because the current iteration is from the early 90s, way before social networks and YouTube and basically everything that constitutes the internet today. But copyright law affects everyone on the internet. That is basically common sense now. And that's also something that you've seen by the last public consultation at the European level, where almost 60% of public submissions came from consumers and end users, and that actually raised some interest in the European consultation, because if you've ever seen one of those consultations, it would be hard to imagine anything more boring and mundane and hard to fill out. So if you look at the submissions that were delivered here, you can still see the old fonts. So who actually wants to reform? Who wants to change something? Who says that the current copyright law is in the way of the development of the internet? That is something that institutional users and end users like archives, museums, libraries, they were all pretty much in line. On the other hand, you have the producers, some artists also, that said, no, everything is fine the way it is. And when you say copyright law is about finding a balance between differing interests, then the balance cannot be that one half says everything is fine and the other half says, no, we can't work with this. We're always on the verge of going to jail. What has happened since this consultation is that there's been a draft, and it's nice that was that there was a German representative, Julia Reda from the European Pirate Party, wrote a draft that evaluates whether current copyright law is appropriate for the current times. It's yeah. They joked about copyright law being the most progressive official copyright law document since the first cat picture was posted. And then there was a response to that draft from Günther Oettinger. In a Twitter view, said, we are in the midst of digital revolution. And even said we need a copyright reform. So it's basically on the green side, on the side of the end users, the users who say the way it is currently goes is not acceptable. So he went even further. He said we have 28 copyright regimes in the European Union. That doesn't fit the reality anymore. And he's completely right. These two tweets, you can absolutely agree to that. Go, Günther, go. And the suggestion by Oettinger that we should think about unifying European copyright law, that really opened a new debate that is to be welcomed. And Günther Oettinger hopes that geo-blocking is something that can become something of the past. So a short explanation about geo-blocking. If we buy CDs in France in the European market, they will come to us without any problem. But we cannot buy MP3s in a French store because there are digital frontiers. So I'm even more affected than you, Markus, because when from my home in Austria, I crossed the border to Passau, then half the services I use are unusable suddenly because GEMA didn't manage to find an agreement with these companies, and then when I drive back there, I can use them freely again. So talking about a generalized European market and at the same time supporting geo-blocking, that's kind of ridiculous. So if you look at these tweets, then you might ask yourself, why is copyright law on position 7? And the reason is that what happened after these tweets. Günther Oettinger was visited by a delegation of German producers, and suddenly he sounded much different. When he said, "Oh, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need to keep our cultural identity, and so we should limit geo-blocking to the instances where it makes sense." So where does it make sense? Well, I suppose it's pretty much everything that the rights industry can think of. So yeah, we don't really know why that sudden change of mind occurred, but it seems that these visitations are very impressive. And there, come back to the draft of Julia Reda, there's been 500 change requests by the European Parliament. Some of them just want to keep everything at the status quo. Some of them want to even make it worse. But currently, copyright law on a European level is a giant battlefield.
Well, it's getting worse. It's all about copyright. No, not copyright. Data security. The basic rule is from 1995. Many people searched for loopholes in the system from the USA, where they were promised to be able to work on the European base. But if you see the office of the data security guy from Netherlands, they control basically everyone. Well, theoretically on the paper, and that's one of the problems. The reform of the EU Privacy Safety Act. What many problems should have been a lot more easier, and how to solve them to make better startups to be able to save us from loopholes and from black holes. And as companies, do we want to give the opportunity to tell people to use the data whatever they want to do with it, or how we let companies use them? And I think it would make sense to be asked. And I believe that many of us would say, well, yeah, for a service, I will give you my data. That's all. That's what all this debate is about. And we need the government to work for the public, to have more rules, to have a better privacy law. And this is one of the symbol pictures. This is our data security representative, and she didn't really took part a lot of in this debate. We hear from her like every once or twice in 2 weeks, and she's a symbol of how our government works for our data security. And there used to be the problem on the EU basis. EU is in again, and we need the EU Commission, the Parliament, and who's sitting there? Günther Oettinger. Well, he's famous in the privacy discussion. If you're stupid enough to put up if a prominent person puts up a picture of him naked on the internet, well, it's just his fault. And it was the case that people put pictures of themselves in their own cloud, and other people had access to that, and they were able to use them in a criminal way, and they copied them, and they made it publicly accessible. And well, he was just about laughing about the victims. What's actually good about this debate is that there was a new page putting up lobby plug. There was Facebook versus Europe. They tried to look at 100 to 1,000 papers and looked at them and checked how many politicians had positions in parliaments and what innovations it led to. And the main problem is the EU had to fix rules after the Parliament wasn't able to do that. In this area, many countries are sitting. We need a European standard. We had a European standard that isn't good enough, and we should have stick to the old system. Well, that's really getting scary now. We're closing up to the end of the session, and what's actually moving us in the moment is these weird abbreviations. The positive thing about the abbreviations you can read there. There's only TTP, what doesn't really touching us, and there's also the Trans-Pacific Act, whatever. Sorry. And ACTA. Since this debate, all these acronyms are not so easy to forget about this debate. Well, we used to have this situation. There's this acronym no one really understands, and maybe it's even English and it's boring. And well, that was the safe side. People didn't really want to read about that. Maybe they want a cat picture, maybe. Since the ACTA debate, we get the feeling that this acronym can't be so boring, and it can lead to protests where people, even in Austria, where I come from, the mainstream is desensibilitated for these problems. And on international basis, there are made decisions where lobbyists, industry lobbyists, finance lobbyists, and regular visitors don't have access to this. You get the feeling that the debate around these acts,
the European Union doesn't get tired of emphasizing how transparent they are. There's these nice posters for events like TTIP, what's in it for Europeans, lots of nice Europeans on that poster where they inform you what's actually inside TTIP. But the problem is, and what's scary, is that what's mostly contained in TTIP is zombies. There's parts and ideas and thoughts that are recurring. They always try to put them into trade agreements, and when they fail to be enacted, then they just put them into the next one. Just like data retention in Germany on an international level, you always find the same formulations, always the same debates every few years. So the most important thing with TTIP and TISA is the I. The I is for investment. And that stands for Investors Dispute Settlement, which allows companies to sue states if they believe that they changed laws, or for example, if they change data privacy laws, or if they extended copyright protections, or if they reduce copyright reductions. So if the European Union would decide to, for example, enact a right to remix, then the investor-state dispute settlement could cause large corporations in the movie or music business, for example, sue the European Union for damages, because now people could maybe make money with memes on the internet. So now you could say, okay, well, investor-state, it's not so dangerous, it's might just be agreeable. But if you look at how things have been going last few years, end of the 80s is when the first investor-state clause was enacted, and since in the 5 years since that, there were about one case per year. Recently, it's been going up to 48 cases per year. We had 242 cases since 4 years ago. So if you think, so you could say if this ISDS comes back again, it will get even worse, and it's really hard to find something good there. On to our last topic, that should be number 10, surveillance. Since 2 years, we know from the media that we are caught in a system that is mostly uncontrolled and unaudited, and secret services do whatever they want. It is basically impossible to find something positive, but there is a silver lining. Suddenly there's increased awareness that it might make sense to encrypt your emails. There's more and more people that you can actually use mail encryption with. The usage of anonymization tools like Tor has changed. It's not just something for terrorists. It's something you need to be able to enact your basic rights. You also see there's a growth in the communities like Freifunk, where people create decentralized free platforms as in response to the even further centralized and surveilled infrastructures that we currently have. And for 2 weeks, we suddenly have a necessary and right debate about what our government knew. That's basically ducked out for 2 years. They suggested there's nothing to this, please move along, nothing to see here. And who knew what, and how did our own secret services work, and are they actually being audited correctly? So we have this system that's been growing for 10 and 15 years and longer in secret. And for the last year, the NSA investigation committee has been interrogating people from the Bundesnachrichtendienst, the German Secret Service, and the NSA liaisons. And if you look at the last few months, we were one of the last remaining media that actually came to the investigation committee. And for the committee's first birthday, people came to us and were like, we hope we could even get this into the news because the topic seems kind of over. And we say, no, nothing is over. Because at that point, the position of the German government was that we need more money we need more competencies for the secret services. We need a data retention policy. And that's the three only response we have had from the German government so far to the Snowden revelations. And suddenly we get headlines like this that at least make us vaguely optimistic that something might possibly change. At least I will try to find the responsible people. But ideally, we want to try to get away from total surveillance. How can we do that? Well, it's up to us. The times where we could just say, hello, internet community, come on. Everybody is the internet community. The society is internet community. There's no more distinction. There's just us. And we can and must design this digital society. Because if we don't, we will have other people do it for us. We will leave it to the corporations, basically, to set the rules to privatize this public space that we all use. There's many possibilities how you each can become active. Digital self-defense is one of them. Use anonymization tools, use encryption, use services, commercial services that explicitly value privacy and data protection. Vote with your market feed, so we get more secure infrastructure. Organize, start local groups, and become a member of one of the many organizations that exist that fight for digital issues. They're growing more and more. We recently realized that Amnesty International, as a human rights organization, finally wants to deal with internet policy issues at last. Even the SPD discusses about it. Also, all those trade agreements is hardly resonating in the internet community, but it's very strong in the unions that are worried about their work protection laws. You don't even have to do much explaining here. It's enough to gather like-minded people who have similar interests. Support the organizations you think are sensible with money if you can invest your time. They all take donations on netzpolitik.org. You can finance our work, but also Digital Courage, Digitale Gesellschaft, up to Wikimedia. There's a lot of organizations that could work even better for you if they got financial support, or develop tools that others can use to raise their voices and network with others. If you can design, then help developing UIs or posters and flyers. Another possibility is to go to politicians. Politicians are not just in Berlin in the Bundestag, they are also at home, where you live in your communities. And in our experience, politicians only react when they have the feeling that there's lots of people who care about a topic. So if you're dealing with topic XY and suddenly you get lots of requests and questions about topic Z, then you might start to ask questions like, what is that? Why is that so? What are the positions? And how do I answer the questions that I'm asked? And if that is too much, then share the content of the people who are active. Click the share buttons on Twitter, on Facebook, help to spread the news to your timelines and networks. And the main message is never give up. The battle has just begun. We conquered the throw of disillusionment. And this is hard work. If you give up now and put your head in the sand, then the people you don't want to win will have won just because you are too lazy. Thank you. One more thing. Last year we had the first that is an internet policy conference. This year we have another one. We'll probably celebrate our 11th birthday. September 4th in Berlin in the Kulturbrauerei in Kesselhaus. That's what it looks like. Thank you for listening. We forgot our merchandising stuff. We have these great tote bags, but you can find them at the New Thinking booth on the right side shortly before the exit. Enjoy.